Hi, everybody. It's Maria Boynton. Thanks so much for joining me for yet another conversation. Today, my guests are Molly Davis, a well-known local civil rights attorney here in Atlanta and across the state of Georgia and across the country, as a matter of fact, along with Brooke Bacon. Brooke Bacon, the son of Mr. Julian Lewis. And we're going to tell you about Julian Lewis. And he was a 60-year-old man who, in August 2020, was shot and killed by a Georgia state trooper. Mr. Bacon, I'm so sorry to have to meet you under these circumstances. This is our first meeting here. How are you feeling today?
Today I'm feeling well. Every day, I struggle with the reality of the situation, but I have lots of support and love surrounding me, and they keep me well.
Of course, we said that your father was shot and killed by a Georgia state trooper. And Attorney Molly Davis, you are the family attorney. Why don't you give us some background? We've spoken to you on several occasions about this case, you along with Attorney Francis Johnson. Why don't you give people a little bit of the background? Because we know something is in the works. You're planning a 63-mile journey. We're going to get to that as well, in protest of what are some of the things that have gone on. Give people a little bit of background, Attorney Davis.
Thank you, Maria. One of the things that we just start out with is that of all of our years of practicing, Attorney Johnson and I collectively have probably been doing this collectively for 40 years, 20 for me, 20 for him. We've worked some cases together and some we have worked on our own. And what we believe is this is one of the most horrific police shootings in the history of Georgia and possibly in this country. And what happened very disturbingly was that Julian Lewis on August the 7th, 2020 was driving in his older model Nissan car. And as he was driving, a state trooper, Jacob Gordon Thompson, got behind his vehicle and determined that he had a broken tail light. And for that broken tail light on a country dirt road, the decision was made by this trooper to do what is called a pit maneuver. A pit maneuver is typically something that is reserved in some of the most dangerous situations where there's concern about life and limb. They're on a road where there's no one there. There is no threat to anyone, and yet and still this trooper does this pit maneuver. When he does the pit maneuver, it spins Mr. Lewis's car out, causing it to hit a tree and then to be in a ditch. And as the trooper comes to a stop, their vehicles are parallel essentially with each other. The trooper is not directly in front of Mr. Lewis's car. And within 2 seconds from taking his foot off the brake, he fires a single shot into Mr. Lewis's forehead, killing him. And the GBI did an independent investigation and they arrested that trooper for murder. The Georgia State Patrol fired that trooper. A month and a half later, the Superior Court judge in Scriven County had a evidentiary hearing and determined that there was probable cause for murder, not for any lesser charge, but for murder, and bound the case over as a murder. And this trooper at one point had been in jail for nearly 100 days without a bond. All of this is really unprecedented. The GBI making the arrest, this South Georgia Superior Court judge making a determination that this should be bound over as a murder, and that this trooper being held without a bond for so long. This was uncharted territory for many of us who have been doing civil rights works for some years. Unfortunately, the justice that we were seeking came to what appeared to be a serious roadblock in June of 2021, when a Scriven County grand jury of 16 whites and 6 blacks, they, despite all the same evidence, determined that there was not probable cause to indict this trooper and essentially sought to close this case.
And
that is,
Mayor, I want to ask you a question in that. I mean, what word do you describe when you found that they chose not to indict? Were you baffled? What word would you say you were at that moment?
you know, we've been doing this so long, it's hard to be surprised by anything that happens as it relates to Black lives in this criminal justice system. But it was disturbing. It was deeply disturbing that we saw this buildup, what appeared to be people who were clear that this was murder. And then these citizens, they dismissed the highest ranking investigative unit in the state of Georgia, the GBI. They dismissed their findings and say, nah, this isn't murder. There's not enough evidence here. And so what we realized is that after we had a chance to witness the evidence for ourselves. So Maria, it's really important that people understand. We're not just talking about what we saw in court. So we saw the evidentiary hearing in court. We're not talking about the conversations that we had with the GBI. Attorney Johnson had that conversation with the GBI director. We're talking about what Brooke Bacon and his family, Attorney Johnson and I observed when the DA, after the grand jury didn't indict, presented all the evidence to us. The video, the audio, the photographs, everything. And when we saw it, we walked out of there almost in an absolute daze and a frenzy, because it is unthinkable that this grand jury could have heard the same evidence and come to the conclusion that this was not murder and that there was not probable cause. We're not talking about beyond a reasonable doubt. We're talking about probable cause, the lowest threshold in our criminal justice system.
Brooke Bacon, son of Julian Lewis, you heard Attorney Davis talking about when you all saw all of the evidence, yet there was no indictment. What were you feeling at that moment?
The level of frustration was practically maddening. The information as it was presented was very clear cut. There was not much to question at that point with regards to what was presented. As we were informed, the jury did have some questions, but nothing that should have impeded them from coming forth with justice.
So were you born and raised in Screven County, Mr. Bacon?
I was born there. I was raised in many places. I moved around as a child. So I lived there for some time. I lived in Savannah for some time. And I continued through my youth and into my adulthood to change locations until I ended up on the East Coast, where I reside now.
So what is the feeling here? What is the reason behind? I mean, you talk about the number of people that were on the jury. I mean, what is the recourse here? I mean, when you have all of this laid out here, Attorney Davis.
Maria, we need, and you know, when you hear me yell and my wife, Jana Johnson Davis, who's a activist as well, when we yell power to the people, we mean that the power still resonates with the people. And that when we are faced with this kind of injustice, we have to turn to the people, right? We have to turn to the people and ask them to help rise up. And there can be no peace without justice. And so the recourse is for us to have turned to the people and said, come with us to Savannah to demand that the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District investigate two things, not just the murder of Julian Lewis, but also the grand jury that found that there was not probable cause. What could be their basis? What could be their rationale? We want the FBI to sit with each of these grand jurors and question them and query them about their relationships to the trooper or any other outside influences that could have resulted in such an unjust finding as no probable cause. And then we want the FBI to investigate this in a manner that the U.S. Attorney can bring forward civil rights violations against this officer on behalf of the family of Julian Lewis. He violated Julian Lewis's civil rights by taking his life in this manner, and they have the authority to bring a case. That is first and foremost. We think it's important that the district attorney who has the case at the state level release the audio and video so that your listeners and people all around the country can hear and see what we have heard and saw, and will be again shocked and outraged at how this brother's life was just taken without any thought at all. It's just snatched for no reason whatsoever. And Maria, let me just add this. What was really disturbing was that the officer, within 1.6 seconds, fires a shot into Mr. Lewis's forehead, and then he does these theatrics for another minute and a half, talking about show me your hands, like almost as if he's playing a game after he shot him dead. And this is the kind of conduct that we have to deal with. And so that is why we're asking people to join Brooke, not allowing him to walk by himself these 63 miles from Sylvania to Savannah.
So, Mr. Bacon, 63 miles, you want people to come with you. Talk about, how you came up with this march, why you're doing this, and what do you hope to gain? What's your goal from doing this?
Well, this was a very collaborative effort. I do have to give much credit to all the organizers who have been supporting, organizing, Molly Davis, Francis Johnson. There is, in the wake of the decision, there was an emptiness, a kind of a hollowness, and almost a sense of reaching for a means to make an impact, to make a change. And that is something that can be very difficult to do as an individual. This is a method of old to deal with an issue of old. And it brings together the community to bring justice to the community. And that's what we truly seek, is so that we can see equality and treatment and with equality from law enforcement.
Okay, everyone. Brooke Bacon is the son of Mr. Julian Lewis, who in August of 2020, that was the summer of 2020.
Yes.
Yes, it was the summer of 2020. And of course, there was a lot of emotion and a lot of just everything going on in that summer. That's when George Floyd was killed. That's, of course, when Ahmaud Arbery, we learned of his death, and we learned about it much later than when it actually occurred.
That's a great point for you to ground the listeners in the moment, because part of what we think has happened is that in the middle of the George Floyd outrage and Ahmaud Arbery outrage, that Mr. Lewis, it really appeared as though change was happening right before our very eyes, for the GBI to make an arrest, for this judge to make this determination. And so I think a lot of people assume that, hey, finally the tide is turning. And what is going to be important is for those individuals, our allies, and quite frankly, our white allies, to join us in the street and continue. That this is not a sprint for justice. It never has been. It is a journey. It is a marathon. And this symbolizes in many ways the many miles left to march towards justice. And there's an opportunity here for people who were in the streets when it was fashionable to return with us, not in the streets where you could jump on MARTA and get there, or you could jump on the subway and get there, but the inconvenient journey of going to South Georgia to this red clay and putting your feet in it and marching 12 miles in the sun each day for 5 days. And we know folks can't come every day, but pick a day and be a part of a march that is longer than the march from Selma to Montgomery. So it has great historical relevance. And we believe that we have to demonstrate, and this is why we have been so adamantly supportive of Brooke, is that it's a demonstration of our resolve for justice, that to do this is not an easy feat. It is a test of our bodies, our spirits, and our will, that we will not give up, we will not stop. And that's what I think is so profound about something as historic as this effort.
I also want to add, because Molly said something very powerful earlier, as he and his wife advocate for power to the people. And that is in itself, as he says it, shows the imbalance, the inequity that exists in this system. Because given, as he stated, all the evidence that was clear cut and present for the people to make the right decision, the limited or very that grand jury in their narrow scope, given the grand responsibility that they had, chose to move in the opposite direction of justice, the opposite direction of truth. They stole that power from the people and instead inserted their own objective. And that can't stand. That needs to be challenged. And that is something that I believe and I hope will be something that the federal investigation can expose.
How do people get involved? When does this walk start and how do they participate?
Absolutely. People should get involved by going to justiceforjulianlewis.com, justiceforjulianlewis.com. The march starts this Thursday, September the 16th. We're asking people to meet us at 7 a.m. in Statesboro, Georgia, at our Davis Bozeman Johnson office in Statesboro. We'll caravan to Stony Pond Road, where Mr. Lewis was murdered, and we will pour libations to lift up the ancestors. We will pray, but then we will pray with our feet, as Frederick Douglass once said. And that's when we get free, when we begin to pray with our bodies, and not just spiritually, but physically as well. So people, if they can go to that website, justiceforjulianlewis.com, they will be able to obtain the volunteer information and fill it out. Of course, we need donations. We are having to provide security, water, and other things to push this forward. So we really hope that people will lean in and go at this as if it were the summer of 2020, because we need that kind of focus, that kind of energy, and that kind of commitment to justice for Julian Lewis and for all of the Georgians who have lost their lives to police violence. So it's bigger than just Julian Lewis. This shines a bright light on all of these issues that continue to plague Georgia and American society.
You get the final words, Mr. Bacon. Your father, you're doing this as you seek justice for him. How do you want and how do you hope he is remembered?
I walk with the strength of all those who have supported me and all those who love me. I walk with the strength of my father and my family. And I hope that this message reaches far and wide and resonates with people so that they can come out and show their support and really apply themselves to our goal, to everyone's goal, to receive equality and see justice.
Okay, Brooke Bacon, Molly Davis, to the two of you, everyone, it's a 5-day, 63-mile walk. Give them that website again, Attorney Davis.
justiceforjulianlewis.com, justiceforjulianlewis.com. Please join us, pick a day. If you can't walk, ride, but just get there and provide support so that Brooke does not walk alone.
Righty. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Maria Boynton.